All right, here we go with section 3 and your focus question. Obama's first initiatives lived up to his promises for change. In his first 3 months, he announced plans to close the prison at Guantanamo Bay in Cuba and named to the Supreme Court Sonia Sotomayor, the first Hispanic and third woman ever to serve on it. His first budget recalled the New Deal and Great Society, anticipating active government support for healthcare reform, clean energy, and public education, part of which would be paid by allowing Bush's tax cuts for the wealthy to expire in 2010. He pushed through Congress a stimulus package of $800 billion in new government spending for construction, unemployment benefits, and aid to states to help them balance their budgets. The largest single spending bill in U.S. history, the bill was meant to inject money into the economy to save and create more jobs and spark a recovery. A year into the Obama presidency, in spring 2010, one of the worst environmental catastrophes in U.S. history occurred. A British petroleum oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico exploded and spewed millions of gallons of oil in the sea. The Gulf oil spill illustrated some of the downsides of deregulation and the limit of government and regulatory reach in a global economy. Additionally, most of the first year of the first Obama presidency saw intense congressional debate over restructuring the nation's healthcare system in order to give insurance to the millions who lacked it and stop abusive practices by insurance companies. In March 2010, after months of bitter debate, Congress passed a sweeping healthcare bill that required all Americans to purchase health insurance and most businesses to provide it to employees. It also gave some subsidies to people with low incomes so they could afford the insurance. It aroused intense opposition from some who called it a government takeover of healthcare, even though plans for a government-run insurance program were dropped from the bill. Every Republican in Congress voted against it. Throughout Obama's presidency, Republicans remained bitterly opposed to the new law, and in 2013, the Republican-dominated Congress shut down the federal government in order to get the president to abandon the healthcare law. These efforts backfired, and by 2015, Obamacare proved to be remarkably successful, insuring 16 million Americans. The number of uninsured Americans would have been even lower, but 23 Republican-controlled states refused to expand Medicaid coverage for their poorest residents, even though nearly all of the costs would have been covered by the federal government. Moreover, the Supreme Court twice rejected challenges to the constitutionality of Obamacare. Another significant measure enacted in 2010 was a financial regulatory reform law that sought to place under increased federal oversight many of the transactions that had helped create the economic crisis. The law represented a reversal of the policies of the last 50 years that gave banks a free hand in their operation, but did not require the breakup of banks deemed too big to fail and left open the possibility for future taxpayer bailouts. Moreover, when the banks complained, officials in charge of new regulations watered them down. Taken together, the measures of Obama's first year and a half in office saw the most dramatic domestic reform legislation since the Great Society of the 1960s. While change was a successful campaign slogan, many Obama supporters did not think the reforms went far enough. The health care bill failed to include a public option, Obama chose his economic advisors from Wall Street, and little was done to help homeowners facing foreclosure. During 2008 and 2009, the economy lost 8 million jobs and it would take a long time to recover them. In 2014, the economic recovery finally gathered momentum, although it still remained weak. Consumer spending and confidence were on the rise and unemployment was falling. Home sales were rising and the stock market reached record highs. However, Americans' wages remained stagnant with a continuing decline in the power of unions and wealth accumulation for the 1% of earners. Real incomes of most families declined, deepening economic inequality. The middle class shrunk and those living in poverty increased. At the bottom of the social scale, Americans employed by some of the largest corporations received low wages at or slightly above the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. This wage is lower in income adjusted for inflation than 50 years before. Many workers had flexible schedules, meaning they did not know the number of hours they will work, making nearly impossible planning for childcare and other obligations. Nearly 3/4 of people helped by government assistance have a working member, so in effect, the taxpayers subsidize low wages of highly profitable corporations. In 2011, the country witnessed an emergence of a movement that targeted the depredations of Wall Street banks. The Occupy Wall Street movement began with a few young protesters camping in Zuccotti Park in the heart of New York's financial district on September 17, 2011. Over the next weeks, hundreds of people camped in the park and others took part in rallies organized by the Occupy movement in cities nationwide. While the protesters began to be evicted by city authorities in spring 2012, much of the rhetoric protesting the control of the 1%, the very richest Americans, over the U.S. economy and connectedly national and international power structures had entrenched itself into the national political vocabulary. It also spurred a movement among low paid workers demanding a rise in the hourly minimum wage. In 2014, Seattle and Los Angeles raised their minimum wage to $15. Rising inequality had profound social consequences, including the United States falling behind other advanced countries. More than one-fifth of American children lived in poverty in the 2015, a measure on which the United States ranked 29th among advanced countries in life expectancy at birth. The American middle class continued to shrink, and social mobility stood at a lower level in the United States than in Western Europe. So, that was our third section. We'll be back for the fourth.